Okay, hello everyone. Very warm welcome to the Risk Management Professional Free Masterclass today. My name is Samia Bakar, and I'm genuinely going to build something more valuable than a set of exam tricks. We are going to build real understanding of how risk and how the Project Management Institute thinks about risk. This is the SNS promise to take you beyond exam shortcuts and towards capability you can use at work on Monday morning. Here's how today will feel. I will explain every idea in plain English. I will show you why it matters with real examples, and I will give you practice so the learning actually sticks. You don't need to take frantic notes because we will post this video on YouTube and you will be able to revisit everything as many times as you want. A couple of housekeeping points. This is a free session recorded in live. So if you are watching the replay, the same value applies. All the links I mentioned, our website, our channel, my LinkedIn, are in the description below. If you're joining live, drop your name and your city. Whether you are aiming for the PMI or simply want to make sharper decisions under uncertainty, which is the new norm, take a breath, get comfortable, and let us begin this journey into risk management together. So before we dive in, let me lay out the map for you for the next 2 hours together, because knowing where we are going makes the journey far easier to follow. This agenda mirrors exactly what was promised in the session listening, so there are no surprises. For you of the PMI-RMP credentials, what is actually PMI-RMP? Who it is designed. Second, this is the heart of the class. We will work together the full risk process, identifying risk, analyzing them, responding to them, and monitoring them through the closure. This is the part that will change how you think. Third, I will be preparing for the exam, not cramming, but studying with intent so your effort lands where it counts. Fourth, we will talk honestly about the career benefits of certifications because your time is an investment and you deserve to know the return on them. And fifth, I will show you how SNS helps you become job ready and not merely exam ready, which is a distinction we take very seriously at SNS. Keep these 5 threads in mind as we go, because everything we do today, every concept, every example, every practice question fits into one of them. If at any point you wonder why we are covering something, trace it back to this slide and it will make sense. Think of this as a table of content for the next 2 hours. Now let's start with the credentials itself and why it matters. Before I ask you to trust anything, by being clear about where this guidance comes from. In risk management, the quality of your same is true for your training. SNS is a premium authorized training partner of Project Management Institute. That phrase, premier authorized training partner, is not marketing language. It is the highest tier of authorization, and it means our content and our delivery meets a standard that PMI itself reviews. You see that I'm a PMI-RMP authorized instructor. That authorization means I am recognized by PMI to deliver this specific instruction, not just to talk about it. And on the right, I hold the PMI RMP credential myself. I've sat where you may be sitting. I've prepared for and passed this exam, and I work in this field. Why does this matter to you? Because there's a great deal of risk management content online, and not all of it is accurate or current. When you learn from an authorized partner and an author, you are protected from the most common problem in the exam preparation, which is confidently learning the wrong things. Everything in this class is grounded in PMI recognized standards. You can relax into the material knowing the foundation under it is solid. Now, let's talk about why this skill is worth your time in the first place. Let's begin with the question behind everything. Why does risk management matter right now? Think back over the last few years. Supply chains broke in way no one modeled. Technology changed faster than organizations could absorb. Regulations shifted. Economies swung in a rethought almost overnight. Uncertainty stopped being the exception and became the normal. In this world, the professionals who stand out are not the ones who simply work hard. They are the ones who wait clearly, act on it with confidence, while others freeze. This is building today. Look at the figures on the right, which come from PMI own research and which I shared as context rather than as a promise. 96% of credential holders of PMI RMP feel they perform better at their jobs. 97%, it's a huge number, guys, say they communicate more effectively with others. Communication is the number one skill if you want to ask job successfully. And 62% gained a new role or greater responsibility. Gains. They're about communication and career because risk management is fundamentally about helping people make better decisions together. The takeaway from this slide is simple but very, very important. Risk management is no longer a narrow specialist function tucked away at the edge of a project. It has become a core leadership skill that shapes decisions, protects value, and builds trust with the people around you. That is why your investment of 2 hours today is genuinely worthwhile. And it leads directly to the next idea, which is that this skill belongs to everyone, not just the risk managers. So, guys, I want to retire a myth right now because it holds too many people back. The myth is that risk management belongs only to risk managers. Leave it to the specialist. This is simply not true. Patients dearly. Here is the reality. Every one of us make decisions under uncertainty all day long. Look at the grid on the screen. In projects and operations, you make delivery, schedule, and quality decisions. In strategy and finance, you weigh investment and forecast. In procurement and supply, you manage vendor and continuous a continuity of exposure. In human resources, you deal with talent, capability, and culture. In technology and compliance, you face security and regulatory change. And in leadership and entrepreneurship, you carry reputation and stakeholder trust. The discipline underneath all of these is identical. Identify what could go wrong or right, judge how likely it is and how much it matters, decide what to do, and keep watching. The setting changes, the method does not. So, as we go through today, I want you to resist the instinct to think of this as a project management topic that does not apply to your role. Instead, think of it as a decision making skill, perhaps the decision making skill that you will carry into every job you ever hold. Whatever your title, you're already a risk manager. This simply applies to you. Today simply makes you a more deliberate and more effective one. With that mindset in place, let me explain why I'm offering this particular class for free. You might reasonably be wondering why a premier authorized training partner would do a 2-hour masterclass for free. It is the answer it honestly because trust matters to me. The simple truth is that I believe should not sit behind a paywall. Everyone deserves a clear, honest starting point or background. Decision making under uncertainty makes people better at their jobs and calmer in their lives. And that is worth sharing widely. So, my goal for today are exact first to teach you to understand, not to memorize answers, show you how risk applies to real work in plain English. So the ideas feel useful rather than abstract. And third, to build your confidence to take the next steps on your own terms, whatever that step turns out to be. What is that the list? I'm not here to pressure you into anything. If after today you decide that SNS full and I will show you those paths near the end. But if you simply take this knowledge and run with it on your own, I will count today as success because you will leave better than you arrived. That is captured in the line at the bottom, which is really our whole philosophy in one sentence. We prepare you to lead with risk, not just to pass an exam. Next, I will tell you precisely what you will walk away with that. But before that, I'll take a moment and see if you guys have any to the next slide. Alrighty, so it looks like everything. Let me set clear expectations for what you will actually carry out of this session because a class should leave you not just a pleasant 2 hours, but two four takeaways, and they build on a mental model of whole risk process from strategy and planning at the start through identification, monitoring, and closure at the end. Once you can hold that arc in your head, every technique has a place to live and nothing feels random. The second is the PMI risk mindset, which means learning to think instinctively in terms of threats, opportunities, and thresholds. This is the shift from reacting to events towards anticipating them, and it is the most durable thing you will gain today. The third is confidence with the language. Words like probability, impact, response, strategy, residual risk, and contingency reserve will stop sounding like jargons and start sounding like tools you can pick up and use in a meeting. And the fourth is clear sense of your own next step. By the end, you will know whether the PMI RMP credentials fits your goals, and if it does, exactly how to pursue it. Keep these four in mind as we move through the material, and at the end, ask yourself honestly whether you have each one. If the job um, is done for today. These takeaways are not, they are more confident, which is the whole point. Now, before we go deeper, let me briefly introduce myself so you know who is guiding you today. I'm Samia Wakar, and you will see my credentials on LinkedIn. You can Google them as well. I'm a senior and risk practice, the founder of SnSCCS. You can see from the credential row, I have invested heavily in this profession, change management, and more. For today, the two that matters most are these: PMI RMP 30, and I'm a PMI authorized instructor, which is why I'm able to deliver this class to a recognized standard. But credentials are only half the story. What I care about is on the right side of the slide. My teaching philosophy, I teach in a way that is scenario based and practical, not abstract. I bridge PMI theory with the messy reality of real world risk. I treat risk as a leadership mindset rather than a syllabus to be memorized. I connect the pieces: strategy, analysis, response, and monitoring so they form one coherent whole. And above all, I'm here to prepare trusted risk advisor, not test takers. Advanced technology, government, healthcare, consulting, and human resources, which is part of why I keep insisting that risk management will. I've seen it work everywhere. So that is me. My commitment to you today is clarity, honesty, and genuine usefulness. Um, now let me tell you about the organization behind this class, SnSCCS. Let me tell you about SnSCCS because understanding who we are helps you understand how we teach. SnSCCS stands for and Consulting Services, and we are a premier destination for PMI certification training. As a premium authorized training partner, we pair authorized instruction with real world application across the entire PMI certification family. You can see that family on the right, from the PMP and the program and portfolio credentials through the Agile business analysis certification to PMI RMP, which is our focus today. We do not just teach one exam, we help professionals find the right credentials for where they are in their career and then prepare for it properly. Now, the most important line on this slide is the one in italic because it is our philosophy. We build job ready capability, not exam shortcuts. So that learn on test day. I want to dwell on that for a moment. Many programs optimize purely for passing the exam, and their students pass, then forget everything. Which we optimize for understanding first, because understanding is what makes you pass the exam and what makes you valuable afterward. The exam result become a byproduct of genuine competence. Our offering listed on the left include live virtual bootcamps, self-study programs, one-on-one coaching, and SNS Smart Prep, which is included and which I will show you at the end of this class. Different people learn differently, and we try to meet you where you are. So, whether today is your first encounter with us or you already know our work, this is what SNS stands for. Next, let me show you how to stay connected with everything we offer. If today proves you how to stay connected and continue learning beyond the single session, I think of these as a connected ecosystem rather than separate links. First, our website, SnSCCS.com. This is the home for we offer coaching, study programs, and details on every PMI certification we support. If you want to explore your options at your own pace, that is the place to start. Second, our YouTube channel at youtube.com slash and SnSCCS. This is where classes like this one go live. If you subscribe, you will be notified when the next masterclass goes live, and you will have access to the growing library of sessions we publish. Subscribing costs you nothing and means you never miss a free class. Third, my LinkedIn profile. I'm genuinely happy to connect with you there. It is a good place to ask follow-up questions, to share your certification journey, and to stay in touch professionally after today. And anchoring all of this in SNS Smart Prep, our AI-supported study companion, which comes included with our programs. I'm going to give you proper look at it on the very next slide, because it is one of the things that sets our preparation apart. So please take a second now to subscribe and to connect even before we go further. So the value of today does not end where the session does. Connection is how a single class becomes an ongoing path. Speaking of which, let me show you Smart Prep. So I will give you a demo of Smart Prep at the end of this class if we have time. Until then, let's have a quick review. So SNS Smart Prep is your study companion that turns intention into real, measurable progress, and it comes included with our programs. What you see on the right is a clean view of the kind of dashboard you would work in. Let me walk you through what it gives you point by point. You get a personal dashboard and a study plan on your preparation. So it is paced, and you always know what to do next rather than starting at the mountain of materials. You get an AI study partner available around the clock, which means when you're stuck at 11 at night on a tricky concept, you can ask a question and get a clear, immediate, correct answer without waiting for the next class. You get a realistic exam simulator, so the real exam feels familiar rather than firefighting. You get course material and smart quizzes that adapt to where you are strong and where you need to work. and you get progress tracking all the way to exam day. So motivation stays high and surprises stay low. Why does that matter? Because the single biggest reason capable people fail certification exam is not the lack of intelligence. It is unstructured, lonely, inconsistent study. Smart Prep attacks exactly that problem by giving you structure, support, and feedback. During the live session, I will give you an actual walkthrough of the platform. So let's stay tuned for that for the end of this session if we have enough time for that. For now, the key idea is simply this: you do not have to prepare alone, and you do not have to guess whether you are ready. Now, let me show you the destination of all this pointing toward. I want you to do something with me for a moment. I want you to picture your destination because a clear destination is what keeps you going on the hard days of preparation. Look at the certificate on the screen where it says your name. I want you to imagine your own name printed there. This is the PMI Risk Management Professional Certificate shown in the real format that PMI issues. I have deliberately removed the personal details so that the focus is on you, not on me. Think about what this document actually says to the world. It tells employers in a globally recognized way that you can identify and assess project risk, that you can reduce threats before they harm the project, and that you can capture opportunities others miss. It's not given for attendance or for paying a fee. It is earned through demonstrated experience and rigorous exam, which is precisely why it carries so much weight. Read the line in amber because it captures the deeper truth. This is not just a certificate, it is recognition that you can think, lead, and deliver value as a modern risk professional. The piece of the paper is the symbol, the capability behind it is real prize. So hold this picture in your mind for the rest of today. Every concept we cover, every practice questions we work through is a step towards your name appearing on the certificate like this one. The journey is absolutely achievable and thousands of professionals walk it every year. Today is your first real step towards it. Now with the destination clear, let's begin building the mindset that gets you there. So guys, before we touch a single tool or technique, I want to give you the mindset that sits underneath all of them because PMI asks you to think a certain way, and the technologies or techniques only make sense once you do understand the mindset. There are four ideas on this slide, and they run through everything that follows. The first idea: risk is uncertainty that matters. A risk is an event or condition that has not happened yet, and that, if it does, would affect your objectives. The phrase that matters is important because not every unknown is a risk worth managing. We focus on the uncertainty that actually touches our goal. The second, risk includes both threats and opportunities. This surprised people. We are trained to think of risk as a very bad news. I totally agree with that. So at some point, I was one of those. But good risk management is just as interested in upside. A skilled professional captures opportunities as deliberately as they reduce threats. The third idea: threshold guides action. Your organization's risk appetite expressed as measurable threshold tells you which risk to act on and which you can simply accept. Without that line, you would either chase every risk or ignore serious one. And the fourth idea, risk work never stops. You identify, analyze, respond, and monitor continuously, looping back as the project evolves. Risk management is a living process, not a one time event at kickoff. Hold these four ideas, and I promise the rest of this course will feel like common sense rather than memorization. Uncertainty that matters, both directions, thresholds, decide and never stops. If you forget every technique we cover, but you keep this mindset, you will still be a better risk professional than most. Now, let me show you the map we will follow to put this mindset to work today. So this slide is our map for the entire class. So let me explain it carefully because understanding the structure will help you both today and on the exam. PMI organizes risk work into 5 domains, and we are going to follow exactly the same structure. This matters for two reasons. First, it means your learning lines um, up precisely with how the profession defines the work. And second, it means your learning lines up with how the exam is built because the exam is constructed directly from this outline. Look at the weights because they tell you where to invest your attention. Risk strategy and planning is 22%. Risk identification is 23%. Risk analysis is also 23%, and it is the most technical of five. Risk response is 13%, and monitor and close risk is 19%. Now, notice something important. Identify and analyze, identification of risk and analysis together make up 46%, nearly half of the exam. So, risk identification and analysis of the risk together is nearly half of the exam. This is not an accident. PMI is telling you that finding risk and making sense of them is the core of the work. So while we will treat every domain with care, if you are deciding where to spend extra study time later, the data on this slide points you towards identification and analysis. Response is the smallest at 13%, but do not dismiss it because it is where analysis turns into action and it is conceptually very rich. We will take each domain in turn, opening with shorter divider so you always know where we are on this map. Keep this slide in mind as our compass when you feel lost in details. Come back here and locate yourself. Now let's cross the bridge into the teaching itself. So before we move from the introduction into the teaching, I want to show you how today fits into a larger journey because this free class is one step, not the whole staircase. Look at the 4 steps on the screen. Step 1 is the free class where you build the mindset and the map, exactly what we have been doing. Step 2 is structured training, whether this is a live bootcamp or self-study program, fully aligned to same ACO domains we just reviewed. Step 3 is SNS Smart Prep, the study companion I showed you, supporting your practice along the way. And step 4 is the destination. Begin genuinely PMI-RMP, ready, confident to practice, simulate, and sit the exam. I show you this not to sell, but to be honest about what real preparation looks like. A single 2-hour class, however good, is a beginning. Earning the credentials take structured study over time. What I want you to leave with today is clear, realistic picture of that path. So you can decide how far you want to walk and with whom. The encouraging news is that path is well worn and entirely achievable. Thousands of professionals completed every year, and the structure exists precisely so you do not have to figure it out alone. For the next portion of our time, we are going to focus entirely on step one, deepening your understanding of each domain. We will teach the actual content with examples and exam insight. So take a short breath, refill your coffee if you need to, and let's move into the heart of the class, starting with the first domain. So take 1 minute if you want to grab water or coffee, and then we will start again. So, guys, we have some comments, and I am going to take a minute to respond to them in the chat. So, let's do that together. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, guys, we have quite a lot of questions in the chat. Okay, guys, so I have seen your question, and let's hold your questions for the end. I have definitely seen them, and we will answer your questions one by one. Or maybe just tell me in the chat if you want me to answer the questions on the go, because I'm getting in the okay. We have a lot of questions. Guys, so there are a lot of questions. I'm going to continue because we have time limits. So let's continue our lessons and then we'll take another break for 10 minutes, and then I'm gathering questions. So thank you so much, guys, for joining. We have about like 420 people messaged. It's pretty interactive session, so appreciate those who joined. And we have a lot of questions. So if I start answering all the questions right now, I think we will not be able to finish the content. So I'm going to put together all the questions. Somebody is doing it for me, and then I'll start answering them all together. So with that, let's go to our next slide. Alrighty, so we now enter the first domain, risk strategy and planning, which carries 22% of the exam. I think of this domain as laying the foundation of a building. It is not the most glamorous part. You cannot see it once the structure is up. But if you get it wrong, everything above it is unstable. So, what happens in this domain? Three things broadly. First, we work to understand the project environment, the organizational factors, the culture, the constraints, and the assumptions we are operating under. Second, we agree the organization's risk appetite and translate it into measurable thresholds so the team knows what to act on. And third, we document the risk management plan, which is the rule book for how risk will be handled throughout the project. So here is why this domain deserves real attention, even though it feels repetitive. If you skip the groundwork, every later step becomes guesswork. You cannot prioritize risks sensibly without thresholds. You cannot work as a team without a shared plan. You cannot judge severity without agreed scales. All of that is decided here upfront. In the next few slides, we will unpack the key idea in plain terms. What a risk actually is, the difference between appetite, tolerance, and threshold, and what the risk management plan defines. These are foundational concepts that the exam tests repeatedly and that real projects depend on daily. The reference for this domain for your further reading is that PMI practice guide and PMI-RMP exam content outline. So let's begin at the very beginning with a question that sounds simple but trips up many candidates. What is risk? It sounds almost too basic to ask, but defining a risk precisely is where many candidates quietly lose mark. So let us get it exactly right. Our risk is uncertainty that matters. More formally, it is an uncertain future event or condition that, if it occurs, would have an effect on your objectives, positive or negative. Notice three things in that definition: it is uncertain, it is in the future, and it is affecting your objectives or goals. If any of those is missing, it's not a risk. Now look at the four cards, because the distinction between them are exactly what the exam loves to test. First, risk itself, the uncertain future event with a positive or negative effect. Second, threat versus opportunity. A threat is downside risk, and opportunity is an upside risk. And crucially, we manage both. Third, an issue. An issue is a risk that has already occurred. It's no longer uncertain, so it leaves the risk register and moves to the issue log. Candidates often confuse risk and issues, and the test to rewards those who do not. Fourth, an assumption. An assumption is something we treat as true without proof. And when an assumption turns out to be wrong, it becomes a source of risk. So, why does this precision matter beyond the exam? Because on a real project, sloppy language leads to sloppy management. If your team cannot tell a risk from an issue, you will manage the wrong things at the wrong time. So please anchor these definitions firmly. Uncertain, future, affects objectives, both directions, and clearly distinct from issues and assumptions. With this vocabulary in place, we can now talk about how an organization decides how much risk it is willing to take, which is the idea of appetite and threshold. So before a team manages any individual risk, the organization has to answer a bigger question: how much uncertainty are we willing to take on the first place? The answer to that question drives every later judgment about what to act on, so it is worth understanding precisely. There are three related terms on the slide, and the exam expects you to tell them apart. The first is risk appetite. This is the degree of uncertainty that an organization is willing to accept in pursuit of reward. It is an attitude, a stance. A startup chasing growth has a large appetite. A hospital managing patient safety has a small one. The second is risk tolerance, which is the acceptable range of variation around a specific objective. If your target is to finish in 12 months, a tolerance might be plus or minus 2 weeks. The third and the most operationally important is the risk threshold. This is the measurable level of exposure that triggers action. Above the threshold, you must respond. Below it, you may simply accept the risk. The threshold is what turns a vague appetite into a clear, usable decision rule. Read the line at the bottom because it captures the relationship. Appetite is the willingness, the threshold is the measurable line that turns that willingness into action. When someone on a project asks why one gets a costly response while another, seemingly similar, is simply accepted, the answer almost always comes down to the threshold. On the exam, watch for questions that describe a measurable trigger level. Those points or to threshold versus questions that describe a general attitude towards risk. Those points to appetite. Getting that distinction right is easy points. Now let's look at where all of these decisions get written down and risk management plan. So everything we have discussed in this domain comes together in one document, the risk management plan. Think of it as the rule book for how risk will be handled on the project. It is decided once upfront so that the whole team works consistently rather than each person inventing their own approach. Look at the six elements on the screen because together they are essentially the content page of the plan. First, the methodology and approach. So, how risk work will be done, whether the project is predictive, agile, or hybrid. Second, roles and responsibilities. Who owns what, often captured in RACI chart, so accountability is unambiguous. Third, funding and reserves. The budget for risk activities and the contingency reserve set aside for risks that occur. Fourth, timing and cadence, when and how often risk activities recur, because risk work is rhythmatic, not a one time event. Fifth, categories usually structured as a risk breakdown structure, which group sources of risks so nothing whole category of risk get overlooked. And sixth, the probability and impact scale, the agreed definition so that everyone rates risk the same way. Let me emphasize that last one because it matters more than people expect. Without shared definitions of what high probability or major impact actually means, two component um, and competent people will rate the same risk completely differently, and your whole analysis becomes noise. The plan prevents that by setting the scale in advance. For the exam, remember that the risk management plan describes how you will do risk management. It is the process document. Contrast that with the register, which holds the actual risks, and the report, which summarizes overall risk. With the foundation now complete, now move to the second domain where we go hunting for the risk. We now move into the second domain, risk identification, which carries 23% of the exam. If the first domain was about laying the foundation, this domain is about discovery. Our job here is to surface what could happen, both threats and opportunities, before they surprise us. The guiding principle of the domain is breadth and honesty. We want to find the real risk, describe them clearly, and record them well so the team can actually act on them. A risk you never identified is a risk you can never manage, which is why this domain carries such a large weight. So notice the word opportunities again. Identification is not only about hunting for problems, a disciplined identification process also surfaces upside the suppliers who might deliver early, the technology that might cut cost, the market that might open. So, capturing those is just as much a part of the work. Over the next three slides, we will cover the practical side of risk identification. First, the structured techniques we use to find risk, because good identification is deliberate, not a matter of waiting for risks to announce themselves. Second, how to write a clear risk statement, because a vague risk cannot be analyzed or owned. And third, where risks are recorded, the difference between the risk register and the risk report. The reference for further reading remains the PMI practice guide and exam content outline. As you go through this domain, keep asking yourself, how would I surface risks on my own projects? And am I currently doing it systematically or just reacting? Let's start with the technique that makes identification thorough rather than hit or miss. So, guys, good risk identification is structured, not a guesswork, and that is the single most important idea on this slide. Too many teams wait for risk to reveal themselves, but which point they are usually become issues. So if you don't reveal the risk on time, you are tackling an issue on hand. Skilled professionals go looking deliberately, using techniques that each surface risk from a different angle. So let me walk you through the six on screen. Brainstorming is open, facilitated idea generation, valuable for breadth, but only if it is well facilitated. So the loudest voice does not dominate. The Delphi techniques solve exactly that problem by gathering expert input anonymously over several rounds until consensus emerges, which removes bias and politics from the assessment. Interviews and subject matter expert input lets you tap the people who genuinely know a domain. Checklist analysis draws on lists built from past similar projects, fast and reliable, through which a limitation we will discuss. SWOT analysis examines strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and is especially good at surfacing internally generated risks that outward looking methods miss. An assumption and constraint analysis tests the things that you have quietly taken for granted, which is often where hidden risks live. The real lesson is not any single technique, but the combination. No one method finds everything. Brainstorming is a broad but shallow. Checklists are reliable but can blind you to the new. Interviews are deep but narrow. Used together, they give you coverage that is both broad and honest. On the exam, you will see scenarios that describe a technique without naming it, and you will need to recognize it. The anonymous, iterative, expert consensus description is always Delphi. The structured questioning of one expert is an interview. Learn to match the description to the method. Now, once we have found a risk, we have to describe it well, which brings us to the risk statement. So here's the hard truth that will improve your projects immediately. A vague risk cannot be analyzed, cannot be owned, and cannot be managed. If your register is full of one word and trees like weather or staffing, you have a list of worries, not a set of risks. So let us learn to write a risk statement properly. A strong statement links three things, and you can see them flowing across the side. It starts with a cause, which is a factor or condition that exists today, something true right now. That leads to a risk, the uncertain events that may occur, and that leads to an effect, the impact on objectives if the event happens, cause, risk, effort. Look at the worked example at the bottom because the vendor is new to us. That is the cause. Um, Delivery may slip. This is the risk. The uncertain event. Delaying go live and raising cost. That is the effect. The impact on the objectives. Read it as one sentence and notice how complete it feels compared to simply writing vendor risk. Why does this structure matter so much? Because each part tells you something you need. The cause points you towards prevention. The event is what you assess for probability, and the effect is what you assess for the impact and what justifies spending money to respond. A well formed statement practically analyze itself. So train yourself and train your teams to speak in cause, risk, effect. It feels slightly formal at first, then it becomes second nature, and your risk register transforms from a list of vague fears into genuinely useful management tool. With our risk it's now clearly stated, the question becomes where we record them, which is the difference between the register and the report. So once we have identified and clearly stated our risks, we need somewhere to put them. PMI distinguishes between two documents that candidates frequently confuse. Getting this distinction right is easy, marks on the exam, and genuine clarity on the job. So, on the left is the risk register. Think of it as the detailed working document. It holds each individual risk described clearly, along with the category, its owner, and its trigger, the warning signs that it may be about to occur. It records probability and impact for each risk, and it captures potential responses and the current status. The register is a very granular, it is operational, and it is where the day to day work of risk management happens. On the right side is the risk report. Think of it as the executive summary. Rather than listing every single individual risk, it describes the overall level of project risks, the major source of that exposure, and a summary of the most significant individual risks. It is the view you would take into a steering committee or hand to a sponsor who needs the big picture and not the details. The line at the bottom captures it neatly. Individual risks live in the register, the overall picture lives in the report. One is the detailed ledger, the other is the dashboard. So, a simple way to remember it for the exam, if a question talks about specific risk with an owner and a response, that belongs to the register. If it talks about overall project risk exposure or summary for the stakeholder, that is the report. Confusing them is common but avoidable mistake if you understand this. That completes our identification domain. We have found our risks and recorded them as well. Now come to the analytical heart of the course, making sense of them. So, guys, I think we will take a little break now before we start our risk analysis because we have a lot of questions and let's look at them one by one. I will try to answer as much as question possible. And my apologies if I cannot answer all of them right now. I will try to answer your question even after the session, guys. So don't worry. We have to cover the whole content for the sake of time. We have to make sure that we continue, just going through the content for the whole class. But before that, let's take a quick look and start answering questions. Okay. Before that, guys, thank you so very much for joining. I am very pleased to see all the engagement, and it is a great pleasure to see that how many people value risk management, which is one of the hot skill right now. So let me start, and I'm not going to take names, guys, here. So please listen carefully, and I will try to answer each question in the comments after this session. So let's look at the first question. Who should take the PMI-RMP exam? So the exam is best, guys, for project managers, risk managers, PMO professionals, planners, project control engineers, and anyone involved in project uncertainty. If your work includes risk register, mitigation plans, contingency planning, risk workshops, or stakeholders risk reporting, this certification can be very, very helpful and relevant for you. Another something I really want to help you understand is that a lot of times people look at the experience required to do the certification. So one myth is that it has to be like if your title is the risk manager. PMI also look at your experience that is um, technically the risk management, but in a different title. So if you're working maybe in a different role where your title is not project or risk manager, but you are managing risk, this is certification is for you as well. For me, I always say risk and project management is job agnostic. Regardless of any job you're in, if you're adding value to the organization and you're making decisions, you need to manage risk. And today, we all understand that we live in a world which is not very black and white. Uncertainty is an ambiguity is the new norm. So when we talk about uncertainty and ambiguity, we talk about risk. And any professionals who are able to manage risk are the ones who will be um, secure when the time comes and when automation happens. Human judgment is what the decisions will be made in future when the layoffs are happening due to automation. The next question, thank you anyone who asked this question. This is a great question. So, okay, so it says, is PMI RMP better after PMP? In many cases, doing PMP first is helpful because PMP gives you the complete project management foundation. After that, PMI RMP adds a deeper specialization in risk, but PMP is not mandatory before PMI RMP. If your current role is already focused on risk management, you can directly prepare for the PMI RMP exam. So another something I really want you to understand, when you, and I did do a walkthrough on all the certifications using the PMI website live. Feel free to look at those videos in my channel for more clarity. But if you go to PMI's website and you click the certification list, there are different types of certifications. So there are certifications which are like major certifications such as PMP, PGMP, PFMP type of certifications. And then there are specialized certifications. So risk management is one specialized certification, and that means you are specialized in risk management domain, and that really helps you to kind of stay ahead of the game if you're competing with people who only have PMP. So whether the what are the eligibility requirements? So PMI gives different eligibility paths depending on your education. I would say look at my video. I explained in detail the requirement for the risk using the PMI Live website, and that is helpful because you will always be looking at the current information. PMI sometimes changes the requirement, so it's always a good idea to go to PMI Live site and look at that. So I gave you a live walkthrough, which will help you to stay current always. So the next is, how difficult is the PMI RMP exam? And that's a great question. So guys, PMI exam is not about definitions. It tests how you would act in real project risk situation. So I would call it moderate to challenging, but if you understand the concept, practice scenario-based questions, and follow the exam content outline, it is very achievable. Again, every person is different. Our skills, abilities, expertise, knowledge are different. The organizations we work in, that also make a lot of difference, because if I work in, let's say, an industry which is very heavily regulated, I already might be like uh, having understanding of risk in detail. Maybe I work in an industry which is not very um, you know from compliance perspective easy. There are not a lot of risk management happening in those industries, so maybe you don't know a lot about risk. Also, every individual learns different way. So There's no cookie cutter answer for this. Some people I have seen, I have taught one-on-one lessons to some individuals who actually honestly passed the exam without reading the book or anything, just by doing simulators and understanding the concepts. There were other people who did everything, and they were still struggling. So every person's current state decide. So that is exactly what we do at SNS. When you join us, we understand where you are at today, and then we show you how to get to the future state, which means what do you need to complete the exam and pass it. So we understand where you are at today. We meet you where you are at. We give you customized plan and make sure that you cover all the gaps you have from your defined goal, which is passing the PMP exam. So, how long does preparation usually takes? Again, going back to that, guys, um, you know, 4 to 6 to 10 weeks based on your current knowledge, expertise, experience, and your learning style. Um, I did most of my certifications in very small pocket of times because I was working full time mother, taking care of my business, and I never had free time. So I did all my exam by listening audios while working, driving, playing with my son. So, everybody is different. You really need to understand and analyze your learning style. And feel free to book some free time if you want to discuss it further. So, what is the exam format? Exam is available as computer-based testing or online protected testing. The questions are mainly multiple choice and multiple answer select questions. Many questions are scenario-based, so they may ask what is the risk professional should do versus not do. You always have to pick the best example. Sometimes all of your answers are correct and you have to pick the best one. So you really need to understand the concept. It's not a theory test, guys. That is one thing I can assure you. So, how many questions are there in the exam? The PMP exam has 115 questions. Out of those 100 questions are scored. 15 are pre-test questions, but you will not know which questions are pre-test. So, the safe approach is to treat every question seriously and manage your time across the full exam. So, PMI always gives you new pilot questions, and they want to understand how candidates or exam takers respond to them to analyze and then finalize if they want to become part of the question bank they have. And guys, that is why sometimes people felt like they screwed up on the exam, but they passed the exam, and that is the reason that all the wrong answers are probably the pilot questions. All right, so which books are best for PMI RMP? I think we will start with the exam content outline. One myth about PMI examination is that it tests your knowledge. That is given in the standards. So standards are your guides, regardless of it's like your PMP, PGMP, any PMI exam you're doing. Standards are guide, but your exam is structure is the ACO exam content outline. So make sure you really focus on that. My advice is not to collect too many books, choose limited, reliable resources, and revise them properly. So we have posted a lot of free resources. When you do your risk exam, there are a lot of other questions which are related to like project management domain. So it's worth reading PMBOK as well. Is PMBOK enough to prepare is another question. Guys, PMBOK is helpful, but it would not say, um, I wouldn't say that it is enough by itself. PMI RMP goes deeper into risk management than a general project management overview. What we see related to risk in PMBOK is very high level, whereas risk management is a specialized certification and there's their own risk guide. So um, the answer to this question is simply PMBOK is not enough on its own. How important is risk management experience? Experience, guys, in not just risk management, but any PMI certification, experience is very important, because there are reasons why, when PMI says, oh, you have to have 3 years experience for project management, 2 years experience for this certification. So any experience asked in your certification is important, because unless PMI is not a theory test, again, and I say that a lot. It's not testing if you know the definitions or not, right? PMI is testing if you are able to work as a risk management professional practitioner. And that only comes if you have experience and knowledge together. Because if you read the book but you never did risk management, you will screw up big time in the exam, because exam is not testing theories. It's testing the real life experience you hold related to risk management. So, what is a risk register? I guess I'll pause this question because we already covered it. What is the difference? Guys, this video will be posted, so feel free to download and revise and go back to the risk register session to learn about this question. What is the difference between risk and issue? We also covered that here. How do you identify project risks? We covered that. What are qualitative and quantitative risks? We will cover that as well. What are common risk response? So I think pretty much other questions are very technical type of questions, which probably will cover in the content we are covering for this class today. So I am going to hold that. And rest assured, I will answer your questions in the comments right after the sessions, so you can see them after as well. Um, One question I think, how does it probably would be worth discussing and not very technical. How does PMI RMP help in career growth, and what jobs can I get after PMI RMP? So PMI RMP can help because risk management is important in almost every industry, including construction, IT, oil and gas, finance, healthcare, engineering. It shows that you are not only managing tasks but also managing uncertainty. This can make your profile stronger for roles in project management, risk management, PMO, and project controls, even for senior leadership positions. If you put on your resume that you are risk certified, it helps organization or your hiring managers understand that in situations where you will have to work from ambiguity or the uncertain situations, you can tackle them well. So what job can I get after PMI RMP? After PMI RMP, you can get roles such as risk manager, risk analyst, project risk specialist, PMO risk lead, project control professional, risk consultants, and so on. So the exact job title depends on your industry, guys, but the certification is especially useful in complex projects where cost, schedule, scope, safety, quality, and stakeholder risks are important. So, what mistakes should candidates avoid in preparation? Um, so this is a very good question, and guys, I will stop on this question. Any questions after that, we will tackle at the end. So the biggest mistake, from my humble opinion, is memorizing without understanding. Another mistake is ignoring the exam content outline and just relying on books. So candidates should practice scenario-based questions, review um, wrong answers so they understand where their understanding is lacking concept clarification. And I think with that, let's go back to our class. We will just take a quick 1 minute break if somebody needs to go grab water or coffee or use the washroom, and we'll see you in 1 minute. Alrighty, so welcome back, guys. So we now reach the third domain, risk analysis, and I'm going to go a little faster now because we have more content to cover, guys, than time. So I'm going to speed up now. So risk analysis, which also carries 23% of the exam and is, in my experience, the most technical part of the entire course. So if the next few slides ask a little more of you, that is expected, and I'll keep everything as clear as I can. Here is the situation we are in. By now, we have a register full of identified risk, but not all risks are equal. Some are minor and some are major that could sink the project. And we cannot give everything the same attention. Analysis is how we make sense of them and decide where to focus. We do this in two stages. First, qualitative analysis, which is fast and judgment based. We rate each risk by how likely it is and how big it is. Its impact would be, and we use that to prioritize. Most risks never need anything more than this. Second, for the risk that justify it, quantitative analysis, where we put actual numbers on exposure using technique like expected monetary value and simulation. The key insight is that these two stages work together. Qualitative analysis, the filter that tells you which few risks deserve the heavier quantitative treatment. You should not run a complex simulation on every minor risk. That would waste enormous effort. You qualify first and then quantify selectively. Over the next three slides, we'll cover the probability and impact matrix, the work hordes of the qualitative analysis, then expect monetary value with a worked example, and finally the main quantitative technique you need to recognize. The reference remains the PMI practice guide and exam outline. Take a breath and let us start with how to prioritize using probability and impact. So, guys, qualitative analysis is how we quickly run a long list of risks into a clear order of priority, and the tool at its center is the probability and impact matrix you see on the right. The logic is simple and powerful. Every risk gets two judgments: how likely it is to occur, that is probability, shown up the side, and how large would its effect be, that is impact, shown along the bottom. When you combine the two, you get a priority. So a risk that is both highly likely and highly impactful landed in the red zone in the corner, and it determines your that you need to pay attention on this red risk. A risk that is unlikely and minor sits in the green zone and can often simply be accepted. Walk through the steps with me on the left. So, first, assess probability and impact using the greed scale from your risk management plan. The same scale for everyone. Second, plot each risk on the matrix. Third, act first on the high priority red zone because that is where your limited time and money do the most good. And fourth, and this one is easy to forget, guys, check the quality of your data before you trust the rating. Very, very important point. Let me dwell on the fourth point because it is wise and it is tested. A confident rating built on weak or guessed information is actually more dangerous than honest uncertainty because it creates false comfort. So before you act on the metric, ask how reliable the underlying data really is. For the exam, remember that qualitative analysis prioritizes risk and that it comes before quantitative analysis. The matrix is your fast visual way to separate the few risks that matter most from the many that do not. For those few, we often want hard numbers, which brings us to expected monetary value. So, for the risks that genuinely matter, qualitative judgment is not always enough. Sometimes we need numbers, and the most fundamental quantitative tool is expected monetary value, or EMV. Do not worry if the numbers are not your favorite thing, because the idea is genuinely simple here. EMV weighs an outcome by its probability. So the formula is right there. EMV equals probability times impact. Probability times impact. That is it. It lets you compare options like a like for like basis, and importantly, it lets you size your contingency reserve on evidence rather than on instinct or guesswork. So let us work through the example on the screen together, because seeing it makes it click. Suppose we have a threat, a 30% chance of a $50,000 overrun. 30% of 50,000 is $15,000. And because it is a threat, it is a negative. So minus 15,000. Now an opportunity and 20% chance of a $40,000 saving. 20% of 40,000 is $8,000, a positive. So plus 8,000. And them together at the net expected value of these two risks is minus $7,000. Now, here is the practical payoff. That $7,000 expected loss is the evidence based amount you would set aside as contingency for these risks. Not a number plucked from air, not a politically negotiated figure, but a defensible calculation. When a sponsor asks you why you need a particular reserve, EMV gives you an answer you can stand behind. On the exam, you will see EMV calculations, and the trap is forgetting that threats are negative, opportunities are positive. Keep the signs straight, and the arithmetic is easy. EMV is the foundation. Now, let me show you three more quantitative techniques you should recognize. So, guys, beyond expected monetary value, there are three quantitative techniques the exam expected you to recognize. You will not be asked to perform the heavy mathematics by hand, but you must know what each one does and when it is used. Let's take them on at a time. And just for sidebar, in the exam, PMI does provide you calculator as well. The first one is Monte Carlo simulation. This runs thousands of scenarios using the ranges of uncertainty across your project, and it produces a picture of the possible outcomes along with the probability of meeting your cost or schedule targets. Instead of a single guess, you get a realistic range. When someone says there's an 80% chance we finish within budget, a Monte Carlo simulation is usually behind that statement. The second is sensitivity analysis. This ranks which individual risks have the greatest effect on your outcome, so you know where to focus. Characteristic output is the tornado diagram, named because the bars are arranged longest at the top to shortest at the bottom, forming a funnel shape. If you see tornado diagram on the exam, think sensitivity analysis immediately. The third is decision tree analysis. This maps out choices and the chance events that follow them. Then uses expected monetary value at each branch to identify the most valuable path forward. So it shows you make a defensible decision between, say, building in-house versus outsourcing when each option carries different risks. So the thread connecting all three is that they replace gut feeling with structured evidence. You do not need to compute them all by hand, but you absolutely must know what each one tells you and recognize it from a description. Monte Carlo gives you a range, sensitively ranks the drivers, decision tree chooses the path. So that completes our analysis domain. We now know which risk matters and how much. The natural next question is what we actually do about them, which is risk response. So now we are into the fourth domain, risk response, which carries 13% of the exam. It is the smallest domain by weight, but please do not let that fool you into understanding it, because this is where everything we have done so far finally turns into action. Think about the journey so far. We planned, we identified, we analyzed, but analysis alone changes nothing. A beautifully prioritized risk register that sits in a drawer protects no one. Response is the domain where we decide what to do about each risk and then make it happen. So the domain has two clear halves. The first is choosing and planning responses. From threats, there are 5 strategies, and for opportunities, there are 5 mirror strategies, and we will cover both in detail. The second half is implementation, actually executing those responses, assigning owners, and dealing with the new risks our responses sometimes create. Here is the mindset I want you to carry into this domain. Um, so, a risk you understand but never act on is a risk you have not really managed. Understanding is necessary but not sufficient. The professionals who add the most value are the ones who close the loop from insight to action. One more point worth noting, because two of the strategies, accept and escalate, apply to both threats and opportunities. The system is more elegant than it first appears. And once you see the symmetry, it becomes easy to remember. Over the next 3 slides, we'll cover the 5 threat strategies, 5 opportunity strategies, and then implementation. The reference remains a PMI practice guide and exam content outline. So let's start with how to respond to a threat. When you face a threat, a risk with potential downside, PMI gives you 5 strategies to choose from. Knowing them is essential for the exam and genuinely useful at work. Let's go through all 5 with examples on each card. The first is avoid. So you remove the threat entirely, usually by changing something, perhaps the scope or the plan or the approach. If a particular supplier is too risky, you avoid by not using them at all. The threat simply ceases to exist. So, avoid means you don't do it at all. The second is transfer. You shift the impact to third party who's better placed to bear it. Insurance is the classic example, as is a fixed price contract that puts the risk on the vendor. Note that transfer does not make the risk disappear, it moves who pays for it. So, first we saw how to remove the risk. First one, avoid. Second, we transfer it to somebody who has maybe more tolerance than us, such as in car insurance. So, if we have an accident, we don't pay for it, our insurance provider pays for it because we transferred the risk to them and we paid them the price for that. The third is mitigation. You reduce the probability that it occurs or the impact of it, if it does, down to an acceptable level. So, this is the most common response, the everyday work of risk reduction. So, risk mitigation. The fourth is escalate. When a threat lies beyond your authority, affecting the program or the organization rather than just your project, you raise it to the level that can actually own it. The fifth is accept. You acknowledge the threat and decide to take no proactive actions, perhaps setting aside a contingency reserve and acting only if it occurs. Accept is a legitimate, deliberate choice for low priority risk, not laziness. The skill is matching the strategy to the size of the threat. You would not buy insurance against a paper cut, and you would not merely accept a threat that could end the project. On the exam, the scenario will describe an action and you will name the strategy. Now, let's look at the mirror image responding to opportunities. So, here is where good risk management separates itself from mere problem avoidance. Opportunities, the upside risks, get their own five strategies and they mirror the threat strategies beautifully. So most professionals neglect this half entirely, which means this is real competitive advantage in mastering it. So the first is exploit. This is the strongest positive response. You make sure the opportunity happens, removing all uncertainty about its upside. For example, you assign your most talented people to the activity to guarantee the benefit is captured. Exploit is the opportunity equivalent to avoid. So we avoid the bad risk and we exploit the good risks. The second is share. You partner with another party who is better positioned to capture the opportunity than you are alone, perhaps through a joint venture or a partnership, and you share the benefit. It mirrors transfer. The third is enhance. You increase the probability that the opportunity occurs or the size of its positive impact is bigger. It mirrors mitigate, but in the upward direction. The fourth is escalate, exactly with the threat. If the opportunity is bigger than your project, you raise it to the level that can pursue it. And the fifth is accept. You welcome the opportunity if it arrives, but you take no active steps to chase it. Notice the line at the bottom. Accept and escalate appear on both lists for threat and for opportunities. Like that summary is your memory aid. Three active strategies on each side: exploit, share, enhance for opportunities, avoid, transfer, mitigate for threats, plus two shared ones. So, a response that is chosen but never executed changes absolutely nothing, guys. And this slide is about closing that final crucial gap between decision and action. Implementation is where many well intended risk plans quietly fail. So let us make sure you don't do that. There are four ideas on the screen. The first is to assign risk owner. Every single response needs a named individual who's accountable for carrying it out. Not a team, not a department, a person, like one person. Risks without owners are risks that nobody actually manages. The second is to plan contingency and fallback. So, just to go back to the older point, the owners could be one or two, but you have to make sure you name them. The second is to plan contingency and fallback. A contingency plan is what you will do if the risk occurs. Remember, guys, risk is a possibility and it's in future. A fallback plan is what you will do if the contingency itself fails. Having both means you are not improvising in a crisis. So, a risk is a future statement and it has not happened. So, what you do, you have a contingency plan of if it happens, what do we do? And if contingency fail, then you have a fallback plan. The third is to watch for secondary risk. This is a subtle but important idea. A secondary risk is new risk created by your response itself. So, for example, you mitigate schedule risk by adding a new subcontractor, but that subcontractor introduced a quality risk you did not have before. Good professionals manage the risk their responses create, not only the original ones. So, secondary risks are also very important. The fourth is to track residual risks. This is what remains after your response has been applied. So, you rarely eliminate a risk completely. So, you accept and monitor whatever is left. The thread here is accountability and follow through. Choosing a strategy is the easy part, implementing it, owning it, and watching what it sets in motion is the discipline that actually protects the project. On the exam, remember, the secondary risks come from your response, while residual risk is what is left over after it, as it is very intuitive from the name. That distinction is frequently tested. That completes the response domain. Now we move to the final domain, keeping everything under control through monitoring and closure. So we arrive at the fifth final domain, monitor and closure risk, which carries 19% of the exam, making it the second heaviest domain. That may tells you something important. PMI does not view risk management as something you do once at the start of the project and then forget. It is a living, continuous process, and this domain is what keeps it alive from kickoff to closure. So, guys, think about why this matters. Projects change constantly. A risk that was minor in month might become a critical by 6 months. A response that worked at first might stop working. New risks appear that nobody imagined at the start. If you're not actively monitoring your risks carefully, your carefully built risk register slowly becomes a fiction and not a reality. So, this domain has two broad jobs. The first is monitoring, staying in control as the work unfolds, confirming that the responses are working, watching for new and changing risks, and checking that your reserves are still adequate. The second is closure, formally closing the risks that can no longer occur, keeping your documents current and capturing the lessons learned so that next project starts ahead of where this one did. Notice that 19% weight again, it is a strong signal that the exam and the profession values the discipline of ongoing control just as much as the upfront planning. Many candidates over prepare on the identification and analysis and neglect monitoring, which is a mistake the data on this slide warns against. Over the next two slides, we will cover the main monitoring techniques and then the ideas around residual and secondary risk, closing risk, and lessons learned. The reference remains the PMI practice guide and the exam content outline. So let's begin with how we keep risk under control during delivery. Risk is not set once and then forgotten. And this slide is about the active ongoing work of keeping it under control throughout the delivery. Let me walk you through the four core monitoring techniques you should know. The first is risk assessment. As the project changes, you re examine your risk. Are the ones you identified still relevant? Have their probabilities or impact shifted? Have new risks emerged? Reassessment is the regular health check of your risk register, and it is usually done at recurring intervals. The second is risk audits. This is a step up from looking at individual risks. A risk audit examines whether the risk process itself is working. Are responses being implemented? Is the team following the plan? Is the quality control for your risk management, not just for the risk? The third is variance and trend analysis. Here you compare actual performance against the baseline to spot drift early. If costs or schedules are trending the wrong way, the trend is often the early warning of a risk materializing, giving you the time to act before it becomes a crisis. The fourth is reserve analysis. So, throughout the project, you ask a simple but very important question. Is the contingency reserve we have left still enough for the risk that remains? Early on, you have many risks and full reserve. As risks passes or occur, both change and reserve analysis keeps the two in balance. The common thread here is vigilance, monitoring is active, not passive. You are continuously asking whether you picture the risk fully. Does it still match reality? And you adjust it when it does not. On the exam, match the description to the technique. The independent review of the process is an audit. The check of reserve adequacy is reserve analysis. Now let's talk about closing risk cleanly and capturing what we learned. So, guys, when the risk process we looked at, this is the closure. So, we end the risk process where every disciplined process should end. We clean closure and honest learning. There are four ideas on this slide, and together they ensure that risk management finishes as professionally as it began. The first is residual risk. This is the risk that remains after you responded to it. You rarely eliminate risk entirely. So there is almost always a residue, something left. The professional moves the residual to acknowledge it explicitly, accept it continuously, and keep an eye on it rather than pretending the risk is gone. The second is secondary risk, which we met earlier. This is new risk introduced by your own responses. The point on that slide is that secondary risks are managed exactly like any other risks. They go into the register, get an owner, and are monitored. They are not special, they just have a particular origin. The third is closing expired risks. Risks when a risk can no longer occur, perhaps the phase it threatened has passed. You formally close it and update the register. This keeps the team's attention on what is genuinely live rather than cluttered with the risks that no longer apply. So, those who have experience of working either risk or project management or have used some information system, they are already aware that every risk usually have an owner along with an expiry date. That has to be always a future date. The moment it is a past date, you need to clean it up. The fourth, and in many ways the most valuable long term, is lessons learned. You record what worked and what did not so that the next project and the next team start ahead of where you did. Organizations that capture lessons compound their competence over time. Those that do not learn the same painful lessons again and again. The thread is that good risk management has a clean ending, not a fade out. On the exam, residual is what is left over, secondary comes from your own response, and expired risk gets closed. That completes all five domains, and let's now bring the whole process together in a single view. So, guys, take a moment with this slide because it is the entire risk process on a single page. And if you remember nothing else, remember this picture. Everything we have covered for the last stretch of the class lives here in summary. Let me trace the flow for your one for you for one more time because repetition is how it becomes instinct. Domain one, strategy and planning, whether we set appetite, or thresholds, and the plan. So the strategy and planning we covered um, our appetite, threshold, and plan. The foundation feeds domain two, identification, where we find threats and opportunities and record them clearly. The identification risks feed domain three, which is analysis, where we prioritize our identified risks and um, quality and quantity where it matters. So we qualify the risks and we prioritize qualitatively and quantify where it matters. Those prioritized understood risks feed domain 4 response. So, where we choose and implement responses with clear owners, and all of it feeds domain 5 monitor and close. So, we track, reassess, and close risks with lessons learned. Now, notice the most important property of this picture. It is not a straight line that ends. Monitoring loops back as you monitor. You discover new risks, which sends you back to identification, and the cycle continues as the project evolves. That looping living quality is the essence of PMI mindset we started with. If you can hold the single image in your head, you hold the entire profession in miniature. Each domain feeds the next, monitoring feeds back. The whole thing keeps turning until the project closes. I would genuinely encourage you to screenshot this slide or to redraw it from memory tonight because being able to reconstruct this flow is a sign that the structure has truly landed. With the teaching complete, it is time to put your understanding to test. So let's move into the practice question. With that, we will take a little break for 2 minutes and we will join you back shortly to refresh your memory um, before we begin the questions. Hello and welcome back, guys. So I have few requests. We will probably go a little over because people really want me to go through these 20 questions today. So those who have fixed schedule can leave, but we will
cover these 20 questions in the next maybe 10-20 minutes, and then we will do a quick overview of what we offer. So the class is going to go a little over on the request of some of the audience here. So guys, with that, we have built the mindset and we have walked the full process. So now it is time to put it all to work, because understanding only becomes real when you apply it. Welcome to the practice session. So let me explain how this works and set the right expectation. You are going to see 20 questions. These are original questions written by SnSCCS and carefully mapped to 5 ecodomains in the same proportion as the real exam. I want to be completely clear about that. These are not copied from PMI exams. So reusing real exam questions would be both, not that probably you will get the questions from other exercises. However, we have a full mock exam that is provided to you as part of the training. So everything here is our own and is designed to teach you for this class. So look at the distribution on the screen. 4 questions on strategy planning, 5 on identification, 5 on analysis, 3 on response, and 3 on monitor and close. So with that, let's start the question. So are you ready? Let's begin with the question number 1. So let me read this question. The document that describes how risk activities will be structured and performed, including methodology, roles, funding, timings, and risk category, is the. Now I'll bring up the options one at a time, and I want you to weigh each before we go on. So risk register, risk management plan, risk report, project charter. Now take a moment with all 4, and if you are watching the replay, pause here and commit to your choice. So let's reveal the correct answer. Let me know in the chat how many people got it right. The answer is B, risk management plan. The plan is the how of risk management. The trap here is the register, which tempts people because it sounds central, but the register holds actual risk, not the process for managing them. The report summarizes overall risks, and the charter authorizes the project. Whenever a question describes methodology, roles, funding, timing, and categories, this is describing the risk management plan. Every time you see it. So mindset perspective, decide how you will work before you start working. Whatever you choose, hold on to the reasoning rather than the letter, because that is what carries into the exam and into your work. So let's move to the next question. An organization defines the degree of uncertainty it is willing to accept in anticipation of a reward. This concept is best described as the organization's risk threshold, risk appetite, contingency reserve, or risk register. Take a moment with all 4 and you If you're watching the replay, pause here and commit to your choice. So with that, I'm going to reveal the answer. So the answer is B, risk appetite. Appetite is the willingness to take uncertainty for reward. Watch the wording carefully because threshold is the tempting wrong answer. Appetite is the broad attitude, the willingness, while a threshold is a specific measurable line. The perhaps degree of uncertainty willing to accept in anticipation of a reward is the textbook description of appetite. Contingency reserve is money set aside, and the register is a list of risks, so neither fits. Exam tip: attitude equals appetite, measurable lines equal threshold. So, whatever you choose, hold on to the reasoning rather than the letter. With that, let's move to the next question. The measurable level of exposure above which risk must be addressed and below which they may be accepted is the risk appetite, risk threshold, management reserve, risk category. Let's take a pause. So the right question is B, the threshold. The threshold is the trigger line for action. This is the mirror of the previous question, and seeing them together cements the distinction. The single most important word here is measurable. Appetite is an attitude and cannot be measured directly. But threshold is a specific level you can compare a risk against. Management reserve is funding for unknown controlled by management, and a category is a grouping of risk. When you see measurable level that triggers action, the answer is threshold. With that, let's move to the next question. So the team wants a hierarchical structure of potential sources of risk for categorizing identified risk. Which tool provides this? Now, I will bring the options: work breakdown structure, probability and impact matrix, risk breakdown structure, stakeholder register. So let's take a pause. And guys, the answer is C, risk breakdown structure, also called RBS, organizes sources of risk. The deliberate trap is WBF. Because the names are so similar, but the work breakdown structure organizes the work of the project, while the risk breakdown structure organizes the sources of risk into hierarchy. The probability and impact matrix prioritize risk if does not categorize their sources, and the stakeholder register lists people. Read the keywords carefully. Hierarchical structure of sources of risk equals RBS. PMI loves to test whether you can tell the WBS and RBS apart. So let's move to the next question. A facilitator circulates a question to experts, compiles anonymous responses, and recirculate the summary until consensus is reached. That technique is brainstorming, Delphi technique, interviewing, root cause analysis. Let's take a moment. I want you to weigh each before we see the right answer. So, guys, the correct answer is B, Delphi technique. Delphi is anonymous and iterative. The two signal words that lock this are anonymous and recirculated until consensus. Anonymous and recirculated is Delphi technique. Brainstorming is open and not anonymous, so the loudest voice can dominate, which is exactly the problem Delphi solves. An interview is one on one questioning, and root cause analysis digs into why a problem occurs rather than gathering forecasts. Whatever you see anonymous, um, experts giving input over multiple rounds towards consensus, it is Delphi with no exceptions on the exams. With that, let's move to the next question. Which technique examines strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to identify risks, including those generated internally? SWOT analysis, assumption and constraint analysis, document analysis, checklist analysis. So, guys, weigh each option before we see the correct answer. So the answer is SWOT. This is my favorite tool, by the way, guys. I love SWOT analysis. This is applicable in any situation. You're working in your personal life, making a decision. You do the SWOT of anything. Like you want to make a decision, you want to see, you want to take a job. So you simply do a SWOT of like what your strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities are. Simply can be applied to any situation. So I love this tool. So our correct answer here is SWOT analysis. SWOT surfaces internally generated risks. The phrase strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is literally the SWOT acronym. So this one rewards recognition. The valuable nuance to remember is that SWOT is especially good at surfacing internally generated risks, the ones arising from your own strengths and weaknesses, which outward looking method often miss. Assumption analysis tests what you took for granted. Document analysis reviews project records, and checklist draws on past projects. So each finds risks from a different angle, which is why we use several together. So with that, let's move to the next question. The output of identifying risk, in which individual risks are recorded with potential owners and potential responses, is the A, risk report, B, risk register, C, risk management plan, D, issue log. Let's weigh the options before we see the correct answer. So guys, the answer here is B, risk register. Identify risks, produces the register. The keyword in individual risks with owners and potential responses, which is the register. The report holds overall project risks, not individual entries. So that is the classic distractor. The risk management plan is the process document we discussed earlier, and the issue log holds risks that have already occurred. A simple memory rule. Individual risks live in the register, overall risks live in the report, the process lives in the plan, and things that already happened live in the issue log. With that, let's move to the next question. A team uses a list built from similar past projects to identify risk. What is the principal limitation to keep in mind? A, it requires simulation software. It can grow long and discourage finding new risks. It cannot be tailored. It's only valid for agile projects. Let's take a moment. So the correct answer is B. It can grow long and discourage finding new risks. So checklists, guys, can blind a team to new risks. The question tests judgment rather than a definition. Checklist analysis is fast and reliable because it draws on hard won experience, but it weakens um, the risks in real time. The list can become so long the team treats it as complete and stops thinking. Missing risks unique to the project. The other options are simply false. Checklists need no software, can be tailored, and apply to any approach. The lesson for real project is to use checklist as a starting point, never as the final word. So here the question is, a manager explores whether project assumptions are inaccurate, unstable, inconsistent, or incomplete. The most appropriate technique is Monte Carlo simulation, assumption and constraint analysis, variance analysis, sensitivity analysis. So we will take a moment. And the correct answer is B, assumption and constraint analysis. Testing assumptions exposes hidden risks. The giveaway word is assumptions. Assumption and constraint analysis exist precisely to test whether the things we have taken for granted are accurate, stable, and complete, because a wrong assumption is one of the most common source of risk. The other three options are analysis and monitoring techniques that work with data and numbers, not with validity of assumptions. Remember that assumptions are quiet risks, true until suddenly they are not. And challenging them early is one of the highest valuable habit in this profession. So with that, let's look at the next question. Which process prioritizes individual risks by assessing their probability of occurrence and impact on objectives? Identify risk, perform qualitative analysis, perform quantitative analysis, plan risk response. Take a pause, guys. Feel free to put your options and the answer you think is correct in the chat. So with that, the correct answer is B, perform qualitative risk analysis. Qualitative analysis ranks by probability and impact. The keyword is prioritization, combined with probability and impact, which together defines qualitative analysis.
The most tempting distractor is quantitative analysis, but the quantitative work puts numbers on few risks that matter most. It does not do the initial prioritization of the whole list. Identify risks, find risks, it does not rank them, and plan risk responses come later. Remember the sequence: identify, then quantify to prioritize, then um, identify, then qualify to prioritize, then quantify selectively, and then respond. Order matters in the exam. Let's move to the next question. A model combines individual uncertainties to show their combined effect on objectives, producing a range of outcomes with probabilities. This is sensitivity analysis, Monte Carlo analysis, simulation, decision tree analysis, probability, and impact assessment. Let's take a moment. The answer here is B, Monte Carlo simulation. Um, Simulation aggregates uncertainties into distribution. The signal perhaps are combines uncertainties and produces a range of outcomes with probabilities. That is simulation. Almost always, Monte Carlo sensitive analysis ranks which single risk matters most. It does not produce a combined range. Decision tree evaluates discrete choices, and probability and impact assessment is a qualitative step. When a question mentions thousands of scenarios, a range of possible outcomes, a probability of meeting a target, think Monte Carlo simulation. So, with that, let's move to the next question. A tornado diagram is the characteristic outputs of which technique for finding which risks most affect the outcomes? Sensitivity analysis, expected monetary value analysis, risk data quality assessment, influence diagram. Take a pause. And guys, the correct answer is A. Sensitivity analysis ranks the biggest drivers. This is a pure recognition question, and the link to memorize is tornado diagram equals sensitivity analysis. The diagram ranks the risks from largest effect at the top to the smallest at the bottom, forming the tornado funnel shape. Expected monetary value calculation, weighted value, the data quality assessment judges how good your data is, and in an influence diagram maps relationship. If the tornado appears in any form, sensitivity analysis is your answer. With that, let's look at the next question. An auction has a 60% chance of 100,000 gains and 40% chance of 50,000 loss. So expected monetary value is a 20%, 1,000, 40,000, 50,000, or 60,000. Let's take a pause. Alrighty, so let's reveal the correct answer. Our correct answer is B, 40,000. EMV multiplies probability by impact. So probability by impact and nets the results. Let us compute it carefully. 60% of $100,000 gain is what? So 60% of $100,000 gain is plus 60,000. 40% of a $50,000 loss is minus 20,000. So 60,000 minus 20,000 equals $40,000. The common mistake and the reason the distractor exists is forgetting that the loss is negative. So stopping after the first term can mislead you. Always assign threat a negative sign and opportunities a positive sign, then add them. Keep the signs straight and EMV questions become easy, reliable points. So our question number 14 is before relying on qualitative results, the team evaluates how accurate, reliable, and well understood the risk data is. That is risk data quality assessment, sensitivity analysis, reserve analysis, or decision tree analysis. Take a pause. Just pouring my tea, guys, while we are waiting. So I understand, we are speeding this up pretty, like going through the question pretty quickly. For the sake of time we have on hand right now, feel free to go back and, the recording will be posted. And feel free to go back, listen to the recording, pause, and then answer on your own time. So let's reveal the correct answer, and that is A, risk data quality assessment. Rate the data before you trust the rating. The keywords are accurate, reliable, and well understood data, which describes a risk data quality assessment. This is the wise habit of checking your inputs before trusting your conclusions, because a confident rating built on weak data is worse than honest uncertainty. The other options are analysis and monitoring techniques that assume the data is already sound. The mindset lesson here is humility about your inputs, which is mark of a mature risk professional. Let's move to our question number 15. A manager hires a specialist subcontractor on a fixed price contract for a high threat activity because they are better placed to manage it. This is mitigate, transfer, avoid, accept. Take a pause. Let's reveal the answer. So the answer is B, transfer. Transfer shifts impact to a party better able to bear it. The signal is the fixed price contract handling is a threat to a third party who's better positioned to manage it. This is transfer. The tempting distractor is mitigate, but mitigate means you reduce the probability or impact yourself, whereas here you are moving the risk to someone else. Avoid would mean eliminating the activity entirely, and accept would mean doing nothing proactive. So, insurance and fixed priced contracts are classic transfer examples as we discussed earlier in this class. That let's move to the next question. An opportunity would greatly benefit the project, so the team assigns it most talented people to make sure it is realized. This is enhance, exploit, share, or accept. Let's take a pause. Let's reveal the answer. So the answer is B, exploit. Exploit makes an opportunity certain to happen. Notice this is an opportunity, not a threat. So we are choosing from the positive strategies. The key phrase is make sure it is realized, which means removing all uncertainty about the upside. And that is exploit, the strongest positive response. Enhance only increases the probability or impact. It does not guarantee the outcome. So it is the close distractor. Share would mean partnering with someone else, and accept would mean taking no action. Assigning your best people to guarantee a benefit is the textbook example of exploit. So, our next question is, a threat lies outside the project manager's authority and affects objectives at the program or portfolio level. The best response is to accept the threat, escalate the threat, mitigate the threat, or transfer the threat. Take a moment. Feel free to write your answers in the chat, guys. Alrighty, so let's reveal the answer. And the correct answer is escalate the threat. Escalate the threat. Escalate when a risk is beyond your authority. Very intuitive, guys. So you always escalate things are beyond your authority, right? It's very intuitive. The decisive phrase is outside the project manager's authority and at the program or portfolio level. When a risk genuinely belongs to a higher level than your project, the correct answer or action is to escalate it to the higher authorities. And it could be a program or portfolio. You escalate the level above when it is beyond your control. Trying to mitigate or transfer risks you have no authority over would be overstepping and ineffective. And accepting a serious threat you cannot control would be negligent. Escalate is the right and the responsible choice. The exam rewards recognizing the limits of your authority. So, next question. During execution, the manager checks whether responses remain effective, whether new risks emerged, and whether processes are followed. This belongs to identify risk, monitor risk, plan risk response, or perform qualitative risk analysis. Let's take a pause. So, guys, the correct answer here is B, monitor risk. Monitor risks, track effectiveness, and surface new risks. The timing were during execution combined with checking whether responses still work and whether new risks have appeared. Points squarely at monitor risk. Identify risk is the original discovery step. Plan risk response is where you decide what to do, and quantitative analysis puts number on the risks. The ongoing, during, delivery, checking of effectiveness, and emergence of the new risk is monitoring. Remember that monitoring is continued and active, not one-time event, which is why this domain carries such a heavy weight. Question number 19. Which technique provides a structured, independent review of the risk process and the response being implemented? So, which technique provides a structured, independent review of the risk process and the response being implemented? Risk audit, risk assessment, variance and trend analysis, or reserve analysis? Take a pause and let's reveal the correct answer. Risk audit. Risk audit independently reviews the process itself. The keywords are structured, independent review of the process and the response. So that is a risk audit, which is essentially quality control for your risk management, asking whether the process itself is working, not just whether individual risks have changed. Risk assessment reevaluates the risk themselves. Variance and trend analysis compares performance to baseline, and reserve analysis checks reserve adequacy. The word that separates the audit from the rest is independent. A review of how well the whole process is being run. So, with that, let's move to our last question. I hope, guys, you are feeling better by now. Maybe your questions are more accurate than when we started. Let me know in the comments. So the manager compares the contingency reserve remaining against the risk remaining to judge whether the reserve is still adequate. This is earned value analysis, reserve analysis, sensitive analysis, or risk audit analysis. And the correct answer is B. Reserve analysis. Reserve analysis weighs remaining reserve against remaining risks. The giveaway is contingency reserve remaining compared against the risk remaining, which is exactly what reserve analysis does. Project progress, some risks pause and some occur, and the reserve is drawn down. So you continuously check whether what is left is still enough for what remains. Earned value analysis measures cost and schedule performance. Sensitivity analysis rank risk drivers, and a risk audit reviews the process. So when a question pairs the word reserve and adequate, the answer is reserve analysis. So with that, we are technically done with our questions and answer. Here is the complete answer key for the all 20 questions grouped by domain. So you can see at a glance how did you do across 5 areas. Take a moment to tally your results honestly. If you scored well across the board, congratulations. This is generally a good sign that the concepts have landed. If you found certain domains harder than others, that is even more useful information because it tells you precisely where to focus your study. Perhaps identification felt comfortable, but analysis was shaky, or response made sense, but monitoring did not. That pattern is your personalized study plan handed to you for free right now, guys. So here is the most important thing I can tell you about this slide. The number you got right matters far less than understanding why each answer is what it is. A person who scores 12 out of 20 but deeply understand the reasoning behind every question is in far stronger position than someone who scored 18 by guessing well. The exam and real projects reward understanding, not luck. So my instruction is this. Do not simply check your letters against this key and move on. For every question, especially the ones you missed, go back to the slide, reread the rationale, ask yourself why the correct answer is correct, and just importantly, why each of other option is wrong. So that second habit, understanding the distractor, is what separates strong candidates from average one.
The next slide gives you a simple, repeatable method for exactly this kind of review so that your practice always turns into progress rather than just scores. Let's look at how to review your mistakes. How you review is what turns practice into genuine progress, guys. So let me give you a simple, repeatable method that works far better than just noting the right answer and moving on. The first principle is to understand, not to memorize. For every question, learn why the answer is right at the level of the underlying concept, not just which letter to pick. If you memorize letters, a slightly free word question will defeat you. If you understand the concept, you can answer any version of it. The second principle is to test the distractors. For each wrong option, ask yourself why it is wrong. This is where most of the learning actually hides because the wrong options are usually plausible sounding and represent the exact confusion the exam is probing. Understanding why mitigate is not transfer. Sorry, guys, a little distractor. So, understanding why mitigate is not transfer or why the report is not the register is deeply valuable. The third principle is to map it to the domain. Tie each question back to its echo domain so you start to see patterns rather than isolated facts. Over time, you will recognize the shape of a strategy and planning question versus an analysis question. The fourth principle is to reread the concept. When you miss a question, return to the idea behind it in these slides for your study material and close the gap properly before moving on. And the fifth principle is to redo after a day. Reattempt the questions you missed a day or two later to confirm the learning has truly stuck rather than just felt familiar in the moment. So remember the line at the top, a wrong answer is information, not failure. Reviewed well, it is the single fastest way to improve. Adopt this method and your study time will work far harder for you. Now, as we begin to close, let's return to the mindset that holds all of us together. As we move towards closing, I want to bring you back where we started. The mindset, because the mindset is what will outlast every individual fact and technique we cover today. If the details fade, these four ideas should remain. The first risk is uncertainty that matters. You manage the uncertainty that could actually affect your objectives, not every conceivable unknown. This keeps you focused on what counts. The second, risk runs in both directions. You pursue opportunities as deliberately as you reduce threats. The professional who only plays defense capture half the value. The one who also chase upside methodologically stand out. The third, thresholds decide. Your appetite and your threshold tell you what to act on and what to accept, so you spend your limited energy where it matters rather than chasing every small worry. And the fourth, the work never stops. You identify, analyze, respond, and monitor continuously, looping back as conditions change. Risk management is a living discipline, not a box you tick at the kickoff. Carry these four ideas and techniques, you will always have somewhere to live. In fact, if you ever feel lost in the details on the exam or on a project, return to these four reasons from them, and you will usually find your way to a sound answer. This mindset is a real gift of today. More than any single definition or formula, it changes how you see decisions, not just how you answer questions. Hold on to it. Now, let me show you how to keep building on what you have learned.
with a clear path forward. So, if today has lit a spark, and I hope it has, let me show you how to keep the momentum going, because the worst thing that can happen after a good class is for the energy to fade with nothing to channel it into. The same five domains structure we use today continues inside SNS Smart Prep, so your study stays aligned to exam from the very first day. Look at the path on the screen. Step one, personal study plan, a dashboard that paces your preparation sensibly toward exam day so you always know what to do next. Step two, the AI study partner, which means you can ask questions, get clear answers, and time you are stuck day or night without waiting. Step three, the exam simulators give you realistic practice under exam like conditions so the real thing feels familiar rather than frightening. And step four, the destination sitting, PMI-RMP with evidence based confidence because you will have data showing you're ready, not just a hope. I want to stress the phrase you do not have to do this alone because this is generally the difference maker. Most capable people who fail certification exams do not fail for lack of ability. They fail because they studied in isolation, inconsistently, with no feedback on whether they were actually ready. A structured support path removes exactly that failure mode. So, whether you choose to walk this path with SNS or to build your own, please do build a path. Knowledge without plan tends to evaporate. With a plan today becomes the first step of your journey that ends with your name on the certificate. And that brings us to the final thing I want to ask you. We have reached the end of our 2 hour together, and I want to thank you sincerely for spending time building real risk skills with you. You showed up to learn properly beyond shortcuts, and that says something good about how you approach your career. Let me leave with a few simple next steps, all on the screen. Was subscribe to SNS channel on YouTube so you catch the next masterclass and the growing library of free sessions. Second, connect with me on LinkedIn, where I am always glad to answer a follow up question or hear about your certification journey. And third, visit sns.com to explore our bootcamp, our coaching, and SNS prep, and to find the path that fits your needs. If you would like to talk directly, our contact details are right here by email at info@sns.com, by phone, and through the website. There is a real person on the other end who wants to help you succeed. Now, before you go, do not do one last thing with me. Picture your name on PMI RMP certification again. That image is not a fantasy, it is a destination. And today you took a genuine first step towards it. The rest of the journey is walkable, one structured step at a time, that you do not have to walk it alone. Thank you again for being here. Keep thinking in terms of threats, opportunities, and thresholds. Lead with the risk, not fear. And I very much look forward to seeing you in the next class. Until then, take care and take that next step. Thank you.